where I help people change the way they think about money so they can start building wealth, right? And today's conversation is going to be with Ian, who is a property investor, and he is also a serial entrepreneur. And he is going to tell us, he's going to give us some insight to how he is building wealth, his wealth from little as well. And he's going to, he has a remarkable story. I can't wait for you to hear it. And the most exciting part is he has this huge vision, not just for himself, but for, his children and his children's children and his children's children's children and his children's 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 children. Yeah. He has a huge plan for all these people. So more people are popping on. I'm going to be letting them in. Hi everyone, join in. As I was just telling those who came in a few minutes ago that I'm Elizabeth Buko and I'm the founder of Wealth from Little, where we help women change the way, and men, change the way that they think about money so that they can start building wealth in any, in any capacity. Wherever you're starting is not, you're not, wherever you're starting is not a limitation. The fact that you're starting late is not a limitation. What wealth means to you is going to be different to what it means to me. And all that it requires is that we take action, right? And that is exactly what Ian is going to be telling us about in a few minutes. So yeah, so let me see, where is everyone here? What do you want to gain from this? Can I just ask if you just drop in the chat what you want to gain from this session? We're going to be here for about 45 minutes to an hour. He's going to share his message and you guys can ask any questions that you want. I have been asking questions. I asked so many questions to Ian when we first started chatting, and I've been mind blown by, his drive and his passion and his reasons. But I want to know in the chat, what is the one thing you would like to gain from this session? Maybe it's a little bit more confidence. Maybe it's understanding how people actually, other people are doing it. Maybe it's, just to live here with some kind of inspiration so that that it's possible for you. I just want to know what you would like to live here, in an hour. What would you like to be different about yourself? So let me know in the chat. Maybe you like something, maybe you like to live with inspiration. So for those just joining, I asked the question, I said, what would you like to live with after this session? We are going to be talking to Ian, and he has a great plan for himself, his children, his children's children, his children's children's children, his children's 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 children. So that's 5 generations. He has a great plan for them. And he's going to be sharing with us this plan, and he's going to be sharing with us how he's undertaking it, how he's building his wealth from little, via his businesses. And I want to know from you guys what you would like to take away from this session. So let me know, let me know in the chat what you guys like. If you'd like to take away, you'd like to be more inspired, if you'd like to know what to do, you like inspiration on how other people are building wealth. Yep, me too. I love hearing other stories of how people are building wealth. Yeah. Knowing how to start. So Samantha says knowing how to start. Yes, that's important. Sylvia says she would like to increase her knowledge. Great, that's great. Vivian, inspiration on how people are building wealth. Great. Anybody else? Those are all great things, increasing your knowledge, being able to start, and seeing how people are doing. And these 3 things that these women have mentioned are so important, because when you see how other people are doing it, you're inspired to do it too. And then when you're also in a community of people who are doing it, you have friends who are building wealth, you have relatives who are building wealth, you're hanging around people who are building wealth like we are today. it pushes you forward, it inspires you to keep going. And then knowing how to start. If you don't start, you're not encouraged to start, or you don't know how to start, then most of the times we remain stuck. And increasing knowledge, yeah, we need to increase our knowledge and then take action. How, like, basically what Sylvia and Samantha have said. Charlene says, love your energy, Elizabeth. I'd like more knowledge about how a plan is broken down into small steps and to get inspiration. Wonderful. Yeah. And then we have pitfalls to avoid in property investments. Wonderful. Yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to introduce to you now, I think a bunch of us are in. Ian, please could you, Ian is a property investor and he's a serial entrepreneur. He has this great plan for his family and for his children's children. And he's going to be sharing a little bit about himself and how he started building wealth from little, and, hopefully answer a lot of your questions. So over to you, Ian. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. I know it's really early. You have a little new baby and your wonderful wife, and thank you to them for letting you join us. I appreciate and honor them as well, your son and your wonderful wife. So thank you. And thank you for being here. Just switch off my fan here so it doesn't make too much noise. Yeah. So over to you, Ian. If you would like to tell us a bit more about yourself and how you started thinking about wealth building.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. I'll try to match your energy, but I don't know if I can quite reach that level. So, kind of my journey, I guess, if you will, was that, I turned 18 kind of right in the Great Recession. And one of the first things I did is I actually invested in stocks when I turned 18. My parents and my friends thought I was nerds because that was the first thing I did when I was 18 was open a brokerage account. Not common for an 18-year-old. And as I kind of went through college, I just kind of started more finding that knowledge, reading more books, kind of talking to other people. And at the same time, I kind of watched my dad's company that he had a service-based business, an IT company. And I kind of watched it, dwindle and kind of really become a reflection of what it had been my whole life. And kind of what I remember is that moment for me where I was just stuck, where I was like, there has to be something different, was that since my dad was a service-based business, he didn't have a lot of assets. So it kind of left him in a position, right, where he was essentially forced to continue working, but there was less work for him to do. And I was just like, that can't be me. So I kind of really focused on, how can I really build those assets when I want to do? And real estate, it just kept coming back to it. It was just like, this is it, right? Because there's so many ways you can actually profit from real estate. You have the house itself, which has value. You collect rent. You have appreciation. At the same time, it saves you money on taxes. So, all those combinations together, I was just like, this is the winner. And so, I put a pin in that though. And I was like, I'm going to go to law school. I got into law school and we didn't finish law school, but I bought my first property in law school, and that kind of just kicked this off where I was just like, no, this is the direction I have to go. I have to do this. And so we just kind of kept building from there. Ironically, actually August 12th, so just a few days away, was when I closed on my first property 3 years ago. So 3 years later now we're at 16 units, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Wow. Okay, so first, pause. Let's rewind. You said you were 18 and your dad, there was the recession going on, and you saw your dad's company crumbling. Mm-hmm. And how did that, you were going off to uni at this point, how did that make you feel? What was the difference between like your life and your feelings before like the recession started and at that point that the recession was starting and his business was crumbling? What was after?
So I don't think my dad would use the word crumbling. My parents have a lot of pride, right? And I think that's a lot of people. I remember he started his company when I was like 3. So for 15 years, right? That's really all I knew my dad did. And he still has the company today. He's still working on it. It's just a lot smaller than it was. And so there wasn't a lot of communication about it. And I think that that's pretty common as we have kind of, loved ones around us and people, like, we don't want to necessarily say like, hey, when I started this and I grew this and it didn't quite end or isn't ending the way I thought it would. And so there wasn't a lot of dialogue from it. At the same time, I think a lot of people can probably relate to, looking at someone who's 18 or a young adult and not really wanting to have those full conversations with them. So a lot of it, like, I'm on the outside, like, looking, if you will. But again, it's very clear because, again, since my dad worked for himself, he's home a lot more, right? Like he's on the phone less, he's doing less meetings, he's doing things, he's doing a lot less of those things. And so, we have some conversations about assets and stuff like that, which is really where I kind of gained that knowledge. But, a lot of it was just coming to that awareness that, like, okay, this is something that is personal, that they don't want to talk about, but that I have to figure out. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I really kind of turned to that self-education. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I remember I was really big into like binary option trading for a while, which, like, if anyone doesn't know what that is, you're basically just predicting whether a stock is going to be up or down like 10 minutes from now, which is basically just gambling. Like, no matter how good of a chart reader you are, like 10 minutes is too short of a time, in my opinion. So, like, I spent a lot of time doing that in a college dorm, which, again, was silly, but it was all part of my learning process. So, really turning those books and learning and reading and everything like that and just building out that foundation. I mean, the 4 years of university, in addition to playing, football for the university, and I started 2 different organizations, I read like 300 books. And those were almost exclusively in business, not just real estate, but it really broadened my horizons and everything else of like, this is what people that, retire successfully and have businesses and things like that, like, this is the steps and the things they took. So I just kind of started mimicking that. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Like, I'm not, like, I know that about myself. I'm not Elon Musk. Like, I'm not going to make 4 companies that revolutionize the world, but I can follow steps and procedures and greatly enhance my life and the wealth of myself and my family, without being the smartest person in the room all the time.
Wonderful. So you made this decision that you wanted to gain more knowledge, you wanted to build wealth, you didn't want your future to end up like, like you wanted to build more wealth for your future and your family. And when you made this decision, you were doing binary trading, you were looking at different options, reading books on business. So it wasn't like you had decided from like 18 that you were going to be a property investor.
No,
you just knew that you wanted to get to this goal, which was to build wealth for yourself and your family. And you weren't sure how, but you were like, you just take a step of faith and start moving forward, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of what, so I think stepping back a little bit too, right? When I turned 18, like, I bought Ford as the stock, which I did really well at, not because I was a great stock trader, but because I got really lucky that the car industry in the United States crumbled in the recession and they all restructured themselves. And so I did well in that trade. And I was just like, oh, I'm a genius. So it's kind of like you get momentum and you start on things, you continue to go down that path. And I think the other thing is there's certain investments that are easier to get into at certain parts in your life. Now there's so many free brokerage accounts out there that you can start with. That didn't exist when I first started, that you can trade, you put $10 in there and start buying stock. But like, it's difficult, and a lot of people don't know the steps and the ways to necessarily do that with real estate. So kind of when you first start out, it's easier to begin and do those things, which aren't bad, right? Like, though that's still all wealth. I still hold, stocks today, not a lot. But overall, I think that, again, it's a learning process. It's steps. And each time you learn a little more, you're like, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to change this. Maybe I should focus on this investment. And each time you learn, you can kind of grow and build, and you avoid mistakes, and you can find connections between them. Like, you make money when you buy, not when you sell. Well, it's the same thing in a house. It doesn't matter how great of a renovation you do, how excellent of a property manager you are. Like if the house is only worth 100,000, you pay 200,000 for it, like you're probably never going to make money on it. You know, it's going to take more than 30 years or a lot of luck for it to gain that much value back.
Yeah, great. So that's really interesting. And so if we fast forward to you being in university and you're now in law school, you've graduated, you're in law school now, and what was going on that made you decide, okay, I'm stopping this and I'm going to start investing in property?
Yeah, so I was in between year 1 and year 2. It was in the summer. I was doing some environmental legal work, but at least in the United States, as a first year student, like no one really pays you to do legal work. So I was picking up a bunch of side kind of gigs and jobs and things like that. And one of them was for a guy that was a real estate investor. And so previously I had read these books, and I actually had attended 2 different, like little seminars on real estate, prior to between graduating and now being in this point. And I just met him, and I was just like, no, this is someone just like me. Like it's difficult, I think, when you read the book and you're like, this guy wrote the book on how to invest in real estate. And this guy is telling you, he's telling you why you should listen to him, because he has a $16 million portfolio. Well, that's great, but like, how do you start, in day 1? And they'll give you their tips, but like they're so far removed from that process. Like if you're trying to buy your first property and you're trying to learn from someone that did it from $16 million, they're removed from it. It's difficult. But this person, they were just very grounded for me. I was like, if they can do it, then I can do it. And I have the knowledge to do it, right? Because I built that up. I was like, I just have to take the steps and do it. So I met that person in June 3 years ago. And then within 60 days, I bought my first duplex. So it was just that moment, that kickstart for me. It was like, I have to do this now. Like I'm just waiting for no reason.
Okay. So you're in between first and second year of uni, of law school. You met some guy who inspired you, and you were like, if he can do it, I can do it. Right?
Exactly.
And you did it. You've never invested in property before. And in 60 days, you just did it. How did you find the money and also the confidence to just go for it? So those are the 2 questions. How did you find the money and the confidence to go for it? Were you scared at any point that, what am I doing? I'm a student.
Yeah, like they're definitely, it was one of those things where I felt like, I guess, one, like how do you gain the confidence for it, is that like I had been preparing for it, like mentally. Like I had mentally decided when I graduate law school, like I'm going to start investing in real estate. I had read the books, I had attended seminars. So like mentally I was in a place where I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So for me now, it was just the moment of taking the action. And so really though, for me, like to gain the confidence of it, it was finding the money piece. So like first I'd invest in very inexpensive markets. So I invest in Cleveland, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio. So the first duplex I bought was only $32,000, or about, that's what, like 40,000 pounds ish, 45. So like, that's not that expensive of a house, especially when it produces $1,000 plus a month in rent, or 1,300 pounds. I'm sorry, my conversion.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So it's producing roughly, if you break it down, basically in 3 years that house produces the rent that it costs to buy it. So like that's a very inexpensive property. Like they talk about a cash on cash return, meaning like if you spent $30,000, how quickly do you make that back? To me, that's the most important valuation for property, and that's at 33%. Like most property in the U.S., you're aiming for like 8 to 15. So I'm killing it at that rate. And I did it I took 2 cash advances on a credit card and a personal loan. And that's how I got the money to buy it. So I took 2 $5,000 cash advances and a $20,000 personal loan. And that's how I ended up with the $30,000 to close on the property. Now, doing that is risky, right? Because like I did the math and I was like, as long as the tenants pay, I can afford the payments on it. But if they don't pay their rent, I won't I won't have the payment because I have 3 different payments. Instead of 1 mortgage, I have 2 credit cards and a personal loan that I'll have to pay it every single month.
Yeah. And how did that work out for you? Like you took this huge step. You really, really, gambled on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you felt, scared, but you knew that, okay, you've done the maths, you've calculated how long it'll take to make the money back, and you took the step, you got the money, you bought the house. And how are your tenants? Did you have any troubles, or was it just smooth sailing?
So the lady, it's a 2-story duplex. So someone upstairs, someone downstairs. The lady upstairs still lives there. She's actually lived there for like 16 years. So I don't think she's moving anytime soon, I hope. The tenants downstairs, they paid the first month, they didn't pay the second month. So I did a strategy that's called cash for keys. So rather than going through the eviction process or going to court and having the courts remove the tenant, you essentially offer the tenant money to hand you the keys, clean the place out, and leave. And so, that's what I did. So, this downstairs, it was renting for $500. So they had a $500 security deposit. So I offered them half of that, remove their belongings, clean everything, and move on. I then went in and fixed the bathroom floor and turned around and re-rented it. So essentially I was down for, like 1 month, if you will, where I had to kind of come out of pocket to cover those payments and things like that. That wasn't fun. There's definitely uncertainty in there. That moment didn't feel good, but it was also that trying moment. It was kind of like you give up and you try to sell the house, or you're now knee deep. You just figure it out. And I just figured it out.
And that's the thing that I've found with like everyone I've spoken to about building wealth. You either go all in or you're on the sidelines. You can't be one leg in, one leg out. If you're trying to just make money, then you can do that. But when you're really building wealth, you're trying to build long-lasting wealth, you have to go all in. Go all in with your education, go all in with your mindset, go all in with the actions that you're taking in the right direction, obviously, right? And so you went all in, you faced an obstacle and you found a way out, right? You rearranged things, and then that was just your first property. You're now on 16. How, in 3 years, how did you scale from 1 to 16?
Yeah. So I, again, I started in law school and I didn't have a lot of money. I then stopped.
You literally had zero.
Yeah, literally had zero. And so that was in August. In December, I bought 2 more single family homes. For that one, my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, actually lent us the money for the down payment. So we paid her back, and it was owner finance deal. So 2 houses in one. So that took us to 4 units. Mm-hmm. And that definitely was that's when I think things really like mentally got tough, because now you had other extended family involved. I was leaving law school at that point because I dropped out in December. I got a job in property management and managing apartment communities to really enhance my own skills. Because I recognized that although I read the book, so I knew how to calculate the numbers, and I knew how to draft a lease, and I knew a little bit about rental and tax law because that's kind of what I had been studying. But like, people don't like lawyers, and necessarily like being a lawyer and just being like, well, this is what the law says, doesn't necessarily help you with like a tenant having an issue. So I recognized that there was like a skill gap that I was missing. And so I essentially went after a job that would then fill that gap for me. Mm-hmm. So I started managing apartment communities, and the first community I was at was 470 units. So just massive volume, right? The first month there, I processed 67 evictions for non-payment of rent. So just huge turnover, huge volume, a lot of practice and repetition for myself, which helped me really gain the knowledge in that piece of this industry kind of going forward. But now, now I'm working, and I'm kind of really leveraged out, and that did become difficult, kind of managing those family relations and things. But kind of how I kept scaling was, trying to reduce my expenses, save money, and find owner finance deals. So find deals where I could put a little bit of money down or borrow the money necessarily to put down, and then have the owner carry the rest of the loan. So like essentially in an owner finance deal, the owner acts as a bank. So on a really simple example is, let's say that if you were going to buy a house from a bank, you'd put, in the US, you put 10 to 20% down typically. So if it's $100,000 house, you put $10,000 to $20,000 down. Well, in an owner finance deal, you can often find a way to push that lower. So I'll give you 5 to 10% down on a $100,000 house, and you carry the rest. And I make payments directly to you plus interest. So for the owner of the property, that's beneficial because they earn interest on it. They pay less taxes immediately on it. And so it does have benefits to them. But I started searching and finding those deals. And I met a really good partner on kind of the next duplex that I bought. He's really kind of, I manage his properties now. He's lent me some money to do some additional deals. And that's just, again, opened up other opportunities. So now I was managing kind of his properties as well. So I was just finding ways to expand in my same field, additional sources of revenue. I'd take that revenue and I would just put it right back into the business. And then the whole time while I'm doing this, I'm earning this money in the business. I'm not living off of any of that. I was working in apartment communities, and then I was working a second job. So all that money that I was making from those jobs, I essentially then paid for my living expenses, and then spent all my other time rehabbing houses and reinvesting that money back into the next deal.
Wow. Okay. So let me get this straight. You were inspired by someone that you saw some guy who was in real estate, and he was making money, and he had what was it, 60 million that he had in his portfolio?
Oh, well, no. Those are the people that are writing the book.
Yeah.
Like the guy that I met that was just like, no, I can do this.
Yeah.
He had like 2 houses.
Yeah.
So it was that now that person that was just like, oh, okay, this is a realistic person that I know that's doing.
Okay, so at that point you saw someone who was doing what you wanted, and he was just like one step ahead of you, and it inspired you to take action, and you took action quickly. You are not just sitting and dilly-dallying and thinking, oh, will I do this? Will I not do this? 2 years later, you're still thinking, will I do this? Will I not do it? You just took action, and you jumped knee-deep into this house with zero of your own money. You borrowed the money from financial institutions to finance this house. And then, you faced an obstacle. You overcame the obstacle. You had a lady who didn't pay. You finally got her out. You cleaned up the place. You re-rented it. And then you put yourself in an environment where you could continue to grow in what you were trying to become, right? You
absolutely
really planted yourself in a job that would continue to ensure that you are getting all the ideas and the connections and the relationships and the networks that will continue to build up your mental wealth, your relational wealth, and eventually your actual financial real estate portfolio, right? And
absolutely.
that was what helped you to keep on scaling to 2, 3, 4, eventually now 16. And you kept on just doing this, and then you said you had got a second job. You were using that to take care of yourself and constantly investing the money from your other job so that you could continue to buy more properties and find more opportunities to gain more properties. Now, I want to ask you just there before we move forward, what is your motivation? What's your big why for building more and more and more and more and more of all this? And this is just 3 years, guys. This is just in the last 3 years that he started from 0 to nothing. If you can hear any sounds, this is my beautiful children here just trying to be part of this party. I'm sure you can imagine. So tell us, what is your motivation? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I want to give, my son, my grandchildren, um, just endless opportunities. Like, I don't want there to be the excuse of, we can't afford that. That's not realistic for us. We didn't have the right contacts. We didn't know the right person. I just want to eliminate all of that. So it's entirely building generational wealth. And when I was in law school, an idea I really, fell in love with was, like trusts and wills. And again, I was studying like tax law, so like the most boring type of law. But essentially, in the US, you can build a trust that will last 5 generations. You can't build more than that. You start running into antitrust law. But so for me, it's just, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to take that finance job, or be a doctor or anything like that. Like, if they want to go, be an artist, I don't want like money to stand in their way. I want them to truly be able to do and explore what makes them happy. And the fact that like doing real estate, makes me happy is just a win-win all the way around. I get to do what I love, and I hope that that will perpetuate and allow them to always do what they love, whether they know I did that for them or not.
That's wonderful. I thought that was really remarkable. Like, what potential excuses that people have, and even, young people, old people, children, not having enough money, and you've decided to take the actions to eliminate future excuses, right? Like, I'm sure each and every one of us can think of one money related excuse that we have for not, how money is stopping you from doing something or not doing something, or from living the life you want or not living the life you want. And what Ian is saying is that he already thought about that, and he decided that he's going to eliminate it, not just for him, but for his children and, 5 generations to come after him. That is super, super awesome. Now, I want to ask, like, a lot of people have this, like, this word is just makes most people feel so dirty, makes people feel so like tense. Like, immediately you hear it, it's this 4-letter D word, it's debt. And it's like, what? You got into debt to do this? Like, no way. It holds so many people back, because you hear debt, you hear debt collectors, you hear all these things. And tell me, what is your view on debt, and how have you been able to, did you ever feel icky about debt? And just give us some insight about how you've been using debt when you had zero to actually create more leverage for you so that you can pay off the debt.
Yeah. So I think there's debt that you accumulate because you buy an iPhone, or you buy shoes and things like that, and like that doesn't return anything to you. Like, you don't really make money from your iPhone. But what I'm doing is I'm putting debt and essentially tying it to a house. And then when someone lives in there, they're paying me rent. So that is already covering that debt payment for me. The other reality of that too is, like, let's say you buy an iPhone, on a credit card, and, you finance that over 24 months. Well, over those 24 months, like, your iPhone continues to go down in value because Apple makes a new iPhone. Well, the houses generally continue to go up in value. So as long as you're focusing on buying assets with that debt that are going to make money for you, then I don't view debt negatively. It doesn't even have to be real estate. It could be other business opportunities. Like, if you were going to, start a power washing company or cut grass, and you were going to invest in equipment. Like, even if you're financing that equipment, you're going to be using that equipment over time. And that equipment will then turn around and make you money, or inventory if you're going to sell a product, right? Like, those are positive ways that you're using debt to then be able to accelerate your own business. Because if you waited to save up $30,000, I think the average household in the U.S. could save like $3,000 to $5,000, like, if they wanted to. I have to imagine statistically that's probably pretty close in, in Britain, that would still take you like 10 years to buy that same house in all cash. Well, when you pay for it for debt, pays for itself in 3 years, you just wasted 7 years of wealth building. Not to mention, like 10 years from now, that same duplex now is worth about $60,000 to $70,000 because that neighborhood has just been appreciating like crazy. The local government's done a lot of improvement around it. So if you were still waiting those 10 years, you would have missed out on all that appreciation. You would have missed out on the chance to earn the rent throughout it. And now you'd just be, so far behind. Well, now you've saved $30,000, but you need 60. So, I think leveraging debt to, again, buy you assets, buy you things that will make you money is so much different than making like spending habits and spending decisions. And those can be tough, but differentiating between those is what can help you build and accelerate wealth versus kind of, bury yourself down and trap yourself into needing that second job or needing that raise to just continue to afford what you've already purchased.
And that's so true, because here's one thing that I find: anytime anyone you want to grow more in any area of your life, whether like you said, you have a grass cutting business, or you have you are even a student that you want to become a doctor, or you want to start investing in real estate, or you want to start investing in stock market, anything you're trying to achieve that needs you to grow, and whatever your excuse is like whatever is in your hand, you're like, oh, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, I don't have enough resources. And that's what most of us say, right? It usually requires exactly what you have, right? You need to give up what you have. So if you say you want to become something more in whatever field you're in, and your excuse is because I'm a mom and I have 2 kids or 4 kids, I don't have enough time to study. That's exactly the seed you need to plant. You need to find the time to plant so that you can reap more time in the future. If you're trying to start, investing in yourself, investing in a wealth building vehicle like a business or any business or real estate or the stock market, and you think that you don't have money now, and that's why you're going to hold back, like you said, in 10 years time, everything will be way more valuable. So the money you're trying to put together to save, you're losing the value that you could have increased, not just on property, but even if you were investing in yourself. If you're waiting 10 years to save, a certain amount so that you can start buying books, so you can start, investing in yourself, the amount that you would have grown in 5, 10, 1 month, even if you took the action now, is what you're losing, right? So we have to invest what we actually have to get where we want to go. If it's time, if it's energy. I know some of us are tired. I have 2 kids and they're like, constantly running up and down. If I tell you all the things they've done this lockdown, you guys will laugh. But I have to invest the energy that I'm saying that I don't have enough of, to inspire people are in my community and to inspire myself as well. So, and that gives me more energy, ironically. Okay, so thank you. So you mentioned how you leverage debt so that you don't have to be working all these jobs and all that. But you said you had 2 jobs, and can you tell us about how you are, leveraging your, turning around your multiple job situation?
Yeah. So I think too, just real quick to build off of, how do you kind of find that, the energy to do it? Like the strategy that's really worked for me is to essentially like supercharge my my downtime. Meaning like if I'm gonna unplug, like I unplug. Now, I have 16 units, I have 16 toilets that can explode, furnaces that can go out. But like if I'm gonna spend an hour, like I'm gonna spend an hour. Like there are very, very, very few emergencies in your life. If you really reflect, very few emergencies in your life that can't wait an hour. So I'll put my phone down, I'll unplug, I will spend that hour. It is amazing how much better you feel, like how much more energy, how much more time you save if you just spend it time just like, I'm going to focus on this, just relaxing. I'm going to focus with my kids. I'm going to focus with my family. I'm gonna take this hour for me. You spend that hour. Then if you try to do that over a whole day, because then you keep coming back to it, you don't really get a lot done, and you're distracted while you're working. So that way you can spend your time, with your loved ones, and still give them the dedication, but still be able to then fully invest kind of in what you're building and growing. And then I think to now answer your question of like how I manage that schedule. So I was working basically 9 to 5 in an apartment community. So I'd wake up, I'd go to work. I would bring my tools, a change of clothes in my car. I'd drive right to the house I was working on. I'd work on the house for about 3 hours. I would have my second change of clothes for the second job. I'd drive right to the second job. I'd work. I'd get home at about 1 in the morning, and then I'd go to sleep, wake up the next day, and repeat. And I mean, I did that for probably about 10 months straight. And then gradually, as I was able to expand my income by these skills that I was building and leveraging. So as I started managing other people's rental properties, I removed the second job. I continued to build my portfolio. I continued to, found another client that I was managing for. I started doing, house rehabs. And in July, as of July, I'm now fully self-employed. So that sacrifice, when you hear that, you're like, oh, I have to work 2 jobs and build this business. Like, maybe you don't have to. That's the choices that I made. But you wean those off, and then it becomes easier and easier and easier to manage. And now I still have a lot of work to do, right? Like, I was tearing off a roof yesterday. Like, I still have to put the roof back on the house. I still have rentals I have to manage, but I can afford to do those things necessarily at at more of my own pace than I could have in the past, because now I'm not working 9 to 5. Now I'm not working the second time job.
And that's great. And do you do those manual things because you like working on houses? Is that why you do that, or could you outsource that?
I definitely could outsource it, but like I really enjoy doing it. And so the other thing I think too is like when you say you're like, oh, I want to be a real estate investor, like I don't mind putting on a roof. Like, I don't mind installing flooring. Like, if you're not good at it and don't like doing it, like, don't do it. Like, you don't have to. Find the part of it you like. Find ways to, outsource things that, you don't like doing, and the people that can competently do it. One of the tricks that I have for doing that, if I don't have enough time or it's just something I don't want to do, is I'll go to Craigslist and I'll post an ad. And I'll say, like, for tearing off this roof, I just did this. Like, I have to tear off an entire roof. It had 3 layers of shingles on it. Basically, people didn't build the roof right the first time. So, while I'm doing that, I just post an ad that says, need help tearing off roof on this day. These are my expectations, payment only when you're done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People contact me. I had 70 some people reach out to me to help tear off this roof. Well, I set the price that I wanted, I'm going to be there. I get people to do it. You could do that. And I was only there for part of it. So I had people doing it, and then I kind of left and went and did other things that I had to do. So you can set and kind of manage people to do the work if you want to. Again, you might have to get creative with it instead of hiring a whole company, kind of piece it together and make sure it's done. But there's definitely ways to do it that, are not going to break your bank or not make it impossible to invest in real estate. And again, trade what you're good at. If you're good at managing people, if you have some time, if you have some money, like, you have to leverage something. Like, you have to, when I first started, like, I didn't have money, but I had knowledge. I had some experience with, contracts and with real estate law and things like that. Like, if you're truly starting from a point where you're like, I have no money, I have no time, and I have no knowledge of real estate, you need to get one of those 3 things, right? So spend that time educating yourself, spend that time saving, spend that time decreasing the amount of time you're doing on other activities, because it's really impossible to turn something into nothing. You have to have something to be able to leverage. And I really, truly believe that's in anything in your life. Like, if you want to go to school and be a doctor, well, you can borrow loans for that. You have to have time to be able to do it, right? Like, you have to always trade something. And so for me, that's always kind of what I've been trading, is I will trade time and leverage these other things, because the time that I'm spending is time that I'm enjoying doing it. But if you don't enjoy spending the time to do that, leverage something else.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And may I ask, like, what would you like if you were to share one main strategy that we could take away to look into forward? I know that real estate has multiple strategies on how to start building wealth with real estate. Could you share with us one? Just one, because if we were to
Yeah.
share the whole, all the different strategies, I know you've mentioned some already, but that would take hours. So if you were to share
Yeah.
one that people could, look up on and think about, what would that be?
Yeah. So, well, I know you said one, but I'm gonna give you two real quick.
You
So
have to do. That's
I think the first one we've already kind of touched on is lease options. And this is something that you can do in the US, you can do in Britain as well. I mean, we stole it from you guys when like most of our laws are copied. And essentially a lease option is like you're it's a lease to own, meaning like you have the option, the right to buy this property. So you're still making payments as you would, if you were essentially renting the house, but those payments go towards that mortgage. And it has to be paid off essentially by a certain year. So what that allows you to do, and this is like what I really do to kind of buy properties, is I'll, just again, the last property I bought, unit 15, unit 16, it's a duplex. I did a lease option with $2,000 down, and then I make a payment every single month with 75% of that payment going towards the amount I owe on the property. So now I have two tenants living there. So per month, I make a couple $100, and I'm also paying down the mortgage kind of along the way. So it's a great way to be able to get into the property, make some money, do it kind of at a low, with a low down payment, but then still own the property, several years from now. And the second way that I guess I'd make the suggestion is what people like to call house hacking. So like on my Instagram, I have kind of my like house hacking story of kind of when I did it when my wife went to college. But the idea is you either get a duplex and you live in one unit, or you get roommates, and then those roommates essentially pay for your mortgage payment. So you buy the building typically with, like a first time home buyer loan, or with owner finance occupancy loans, which are much lower down payments, easier to finance. And then you cover the mortgage payment by letting essentially other people pay you in rent. And there's ups and downs to that strategy. Again, like you have to be comfortable, like if you're buying a single family home, living with roommates. And not everybody can do that. Like certainly when I did it, I was able to. Now having, a 3-month-old son, I don't think I'd, be comfortable having roommates, or I don't know if roommates would want to wake up to a crying baby. So, but those two strategies combined, it really can help you. Because again, like if you saved up and bought a home, like imagine right now if you just had no rent or mortgage payment. Like that's what house hacking would do. That money, you can save it and you can invest and buy more real estate. You could then buy another home, then go move in and live into that one. So those two combined, find, lease options where you're investing part of your mortgage or rent payment towards the mortgage and paying that down, or finding roommates or people to lease a property to and kind of house hacking and moving in and paying that down. Both of those will let you kind of build wealth, save money, and kind of start. And once you get the first deal, it just kind of begins to snowball things from that. That's the trick, right? Like you have to have one before you can have 16, or 2 or 5 or whatever that number is.
wonderful. Okay, so you just shared two different ways. You said lease options, which we can do here in the UK, and house hacking, which I know some people do here in the UK as well. Just to ask you, let's say, like, talking about like pitfalls to avoid with regards to investing in property. Let's say, how do you know what house, if you can afford to make payments? I know you mentioned that in the beginning, like you said that you did some calculations to know that, okay, this your first house, if you would be able to pay it off in 3 years, as opposed to waiting 10 years to save up the money to pay it. How did you do that? Like, what do we need to know so that we can mentally also calculate, okay, this is a possibility for me to, you know, to buy, like, or and to know, like, okay, actually maybe it's too much, I can't afford a £5 million house for my
Yeah.
property.
Yeah. So I think, you know, a couple things is just, you know, you have to do the calculations on numbers. So you have to know how much your payments are going to be for the loans you're borrowing or the mortgage or, you know, what have you. Like those are going to be very deal specific. You know, if you're doing what I did in the first deal, you have to calculate what that payment's going to be on credit card 1, 2, and the personal loan. So you start with that number, right? Because that's generally going to be your biggest number, is paying down the debt leverage to buy the home. Then you have to know your property taxes. So, you know, do a search with, you know, like the county records, see what the yearly property taxes are, divide that by 12. That's what your taxes are going to be. You have to know your insurance. So a good way to kind of know your insurance before you purchase the house is talk to an insurance agent. Say, I'm looking at houses in this neighborhood. Like, how much generally would it cost? I mean, each house is going to be a little different, but again, you're trying to get just an estimate or an average. Like, it's a big difference between $40 for insurance or $140 for insurance. Just figure out what end of the spectrum you are, because if it's $40 or $50, like, it doesn't really matter. It's most likely not going to kill your house. So you have your mortgage, you have your taxes, you have your insurance. The next thing you have to do is budget 10% of the rent for maintenance. Like, things are going to break. Like, things in house break. No matter how careful you are. So you have to have like some money kind of reserved for that. So generally for us here, that comes out to be about 10% of your monthly rent. So if you're collecting $1,000, it's $100. So you add kind of all of those things together, that gives you a good estimate of what your monthly payment is going to be. Now, houses can have some variables, like you could have utilities. Are you going to pay the water, the electric, the gas? If you have that, you have to add that into that as well. And then finally, the last kind of metric that you need to account for is what happens when people move out. So you have, that's called like your vacancy rate. Typically like 5% is a pretty safe vacancy rate. So again, take 5% of the monthly rent. So you add those things together, your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance, 10% for maintenance, 5% for vacancy, utilities if you have them. So it's 6 things. You add those together and that gets your total payment. You know, let's say that comes out to be, like if you're going to collect $1,000 and that comes out to be $1,200, you probably don't want that house. Or you need to negotiate the mortgage payment lower. Like, or you have to do something to change those numbers. But don't start just eliminating maintenance. Don't be like, oh, this deal works if I just don't fix anything. Like, you're going to run into trouble. That means that deal might not work. That doesn't mean that you still can't buy that house. You just have to change the financing terms, you know, a lower payment each month towards it. That's kind of how you know how much on the owner finance side, in essence, you can afford. If you were going to do a traditional bank financing, it would be the same thing, right? Only you'd for sure know your mortgage payment, and you could use a more traditional mortgage calculator. If you just Google mortgage calculator, like bankrate.com has a great one. It'll let you figure out, you can play on it for hours, how many years you want to amortize the loan over. And it will, you know, it'll kind of give you that numbers.
So that's like a great way to have an idea before you even buy a property of the numbers of how much you're going to be getting in rental income and how much you're going to be paying out in repayments and utilities and, well, everything that you just mentioned. And that's super great. Now, can I ask you, what would you, and if anyone has any questions, please like put it in the chat. But I want to ask you, what has been your biggest mindset breakthroughs and also biggest obstacles that you have overcome?
Yeah. So like when I first started, I was like, I'm going to leave law school. I made a promise to myself. I made a couple promises to myself. Like, one, that I was capable of learning anything. 2, that I was committed to learning anything. And 3, like I was okay with myself failing. And so those 3 things have been my mind shift. Because when I first bought that property, like I didn't know how to like fix anything. And I just told you guys I'm tearing off a roof like 3 years later and redoing it. So like that, like definitely the maintenance, the renovation piece has been the biggest like skill that I've had to like learn and kind of overcome. And I've done that by, I have some family that's in construction, kind of tagging along with them and learning. I've leaned on the people from, my job with the apartment maintenance. I took a job for free with an electrician, every Sunday for an entire summer, where I just went with him and he taught me electricity work, like, how to repair electric work in exchange for me just tagging along and helping him. So that's been the biggest, skill I've learned. And then again, mentally just pushing and reminding myself, like, there's been so many times where I've just sat there, like looking at something like this isn't working, and just had to, again, go back to remind myself, like, I can learn anything, committed to learning anything, and I'm okay with failing. Again, like houses are standing and people have working electricity and water and heat. Like people repair those all the time. There's no reason I can't do it. I just have to be committed to finding it, to searching, and failing along the way. A really goofy thing I did for a while. Well, it wasn't goofy because I learned, but I like practiced on my own house. So I'd watch how to repair furnace videos on YouTube, and then I'd break my own furnace. Like I'd tear it apart and then I'd put it back together. So like if I'm doing this in February. So if I mess up, I don't have heat that night. So like, definitely like putting your back against the wall. Maybe you should try that in, like the middle of the summer when you're not going to need heat. But, I would do things like that to really learn and practice myself. Again, like you have a sink wherever you live now. Take apart the plumbing underneath it and put it back together. Like, if you do that several times, like when you have to go into a rental, you don't look like the person that's like, oh, let me watch this YouTube video real quick on how I fix your sink. You don't build a lot of confidence with tenants doing that. And again, practice makes perfect.
That is great. I love those 3 things you said. You're able to learn anything. You are committed to learning anything, and you failing along the way is okay, because like failure is how we learn, right? Like I heard this analogy recently about when you have a missile and it's set on a target, and the target keeps moving. Maybe you don't know where exactly it is, but once it locks in, it doesn't know how it's going to get there at the start, but it knows that it might meet a rock, it might meet different things in the way, but it will keep on finding its way until it finally gets to that target. And which is kind of how we need to be with our goals. Like you set a goal to build wealth for 5 generations if you're in, and you start, with one. He picked property investing because that's something that he was passionate about. He likes tearing about his own house to put it back together. And and if you don't like to do that, there are always people, like he said, he put an ad and he found 77 people who were willing to, that wanted to work on his roof for the amount of money that he was willing to pay them for their time. So there are people who can help you do what you don't want to do if you're building wealth this way, or in any way you're building wealth, right? There are always people who can help you do what you want to do and get where you want to get to if you ask. And that's one thing. That's another thing that you mentioned. So being able to learn anything, committed to learn anything. Failure is okay. People are willing to help you if you want to be helped. You just need to ask, and that's really amazing, really amazing. Now, just before we round up, and I just wanted to ask, one last question. Are there any pitfalls that you think a novice property investor could, from your experience, could avoid?
So I think the biggest pitfall is like emotionally falling in love with a house. And so by that, I mean, like, there's plenty of houses that, I'll look at or I'll see that are really cool, or are in that perfect neighborhood, or, like, I guess to really ground the example, okay, there was a house that came on the market that was like 5 doors down from a house I had. And my first thought was like, I have to buy this. Like, it doesn't matter, I have to buy it. It's so easy to manage. Like, I'm going to go to the one that's just 5 doors down. But it was overpriced. It was overpriced and vacant. It needed a lot of work. Like, it wasn't a good deal, like, when I did the numbers. But if you're just so committed to that, especially when you're starting, like, I'm gonna get my first house. Like, odds are the first house you buy is not going to be the best deal. And that's just because, like, you won't have the knowledge, like, that, like, you have more knowledge 5 years down the road than you do today. So the house you buy today, like, odds are you will buy a better deal 5 years from now, just because, like, you're better, like, you perfected your craft and your trade. But falling in love with the house early and feeling like you have to get it, and not, running the numbers carefully, that's easily the biggest mistake. Because once you own the home, if you own the home, you did the math wrong, you fell in love with the house, and its expenses are $1,200 and only rents for $1,000. It's hard to come back from that. You can't force, a house to rent for more than it does. You can try, but odds are, again, like, you'll only get so much in certain areas for certain houses.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Honestly, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And this has been a really remarkable hour. I have learned so much. You broke down the steps that we should take before we before we get our first property. You broke it down in terms of what we need to look for, the calculations we need to make, and you explained to us about your commitment, how you went all in from the beginning. Your first house, you faced an obstacle, you didn't back out, you kept pushing, and 3 months later, you bought your second property, and second and third, and then you've just kept building. And now 3 years later, you have a 3-month-old son, a beautiful wife, and 16 units under your name. How do you balance it with your family? Like how are you maintaining, like, your relationships with your new son and your wife with your 16 properties? Is it easy? Is it okay? Do you break it down, or how do you balance your work life? Let's say work and life.
It's definitely not easy at times. Again, kind of what I do can put me on call, right? Like, anything can break at any time. So, that part of it, can be tough and strenuous. I'm lucky that if you fix something right the first time, it generally doesn't break a second time. So I guess another piece of advice, like, if you're going to fix it yourself or hire a handyman, like, make sure they do it right, because it will just continuously be a problem for you. And there's nothing worse than having your phone continuously ring for the same issue. But for me, like, I think it goes back to just, like, supercharging your downtime. Generally speaking, like, we have, like, a bedtime routine we do with our son, me and my wife. So, I make sure I'm here from that. I make sure I'm unplugged. Like, I'll work before or after that, but, like, during that time, that's the three of us spending time together. So just, being able to set time aside and be like, this is where we're going to spend time together. I guess quantity over quality, or no, quality over quantity. Sorry. Like, like, when we're here, we're present, we're together, we're bonding, we're building those memories. So that way you don't feel like you're missing out on either end, right? That way I don't feel like I'm missing out on an opportunity to build, this business that I'm chasing, these dreams that I'm chasing, but also don't feel like I'm missing out on the early moments of, my son's life, or quality time with, my wife that I'll never get back.
Yeah, that's so true, because, one of the things is, the time, like, the time we have now is so precious that, you never live another day. Like, every second we spend is gone. You're never going to get it back. And so it's really important to have, build great relationships when you have that time. And I know that we discussed that when you guys go out for your daily walks, that you don't take phones with you. Can you just explain a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really powerful, especially this day where we're all, like, joined to our phones.
Yeah. So we essentially, when our son wakes up, we feed him, we go for a walk together in the morning, and we just leave our phones in the house. So just take the keys, lock it, walk. We walk for 30, 45 minutes. And, that's time when just the two of us just get to talk,
Mm.
about anything and everything. And again, that's just more quality time, but there's nothing that can interrupt us kind of along that way. No one can be distracted. And again, I think I just like challenge anyone to think like, what in your life will realistically come up that can't wait 45 minutes, right? Because like that 45 minutes of undistracted time together where we just get to talk, we get to laugh, share what happened in our day, the day before, or what we're planning to do on this day coming up. That's worth more than 3 hours of on the phone watching TV, half distracted. And then again, it's peaceful for the most part. Our son's just sitting there laughing at the world in his stroller, right? He's not crying. You're not running around to feed him. It's a calm time, and we just get to share and enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, I truly love that, because what you're sharing with me is, you're sharing with all of us, is that you are building wealth for your family, and it's not at the expense of your family. You're building it with your family. You're building your family relationships every day. You have this morning routine with your wife and your son, and you have this evening routine with your wife and your son. And then in the day, you're building your wealth, right? When everyone goes to work for someone else, and you are increasing your relationships, increasing your network, and building your portfolio, and building this vision that you have, to get to this place where enough income is coming in to take care of, to get to this place where enough income is coming in to take care of, your children, your children's children, your children's children's children, your children's children's children, and your children's 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 children, right? Right? 5 generations. That is remarkable. Truly, truly remarkable. I think that it's awesome. Like, thank you so much for sharing all these insights with us. I truly love the fact that, you see so many people who are building wealth, and they are so detached from their families. Their children don't know them, and they're building all this wealth, and then they get to old age, and their kids are estranged. They are like, they don't like them, they're not close, or their relationships have broken down, and it's a strenuous time, and they have all this money but no one to share it with, right? But you are intentionally building your wealth in fulfillment in your family as well, and as well as building financial wealth for yourself as well, so that you're personally happy, your wife is happy, your son is happy, and your bank account is also happy. I think that is remarkable. Thank you so much. If anyone has any other questions, you can drop it into the chat, or if you have any last words or any other thing that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to share with us, you can share your last words.
Yeah. So I think that like the last thing I just add building off of that is like, my wife supports what I do, but she's not actively involved in the business. Like, it's not her passion, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be her passion. But you have to be okay with that, right? Like, as you build your business, the people around you, they're probably not going to care about your business as much as you do. Right. And then that's hard to take sometimes, because, you're really passionate about it, but coming to peace with that is you can still have great relationships with people. They can still support you. They can still, wish the best luck for you, but they don't have to be involved to the same level as you do. They won't necessarily carry that same passion as you do, but that doesn't mean they still don't support you. That doesn't mean they're still not there along for the journey, and that's what helps balance everything out as well.
Yes, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for saying that, because sometimes we don't feel like we get as much family support in what we're trying to do, and that holds us back. We're like, oh, no one is supporting me, so I'm not going to do anything. So for you, where your wife she supports you, but she's not necessarily involved, do you have any other support system that encourages you to keep going? or it's just you yourself?
Yeah. So, I've made friends from doing what I do, right? So, I talk to those people all the time. Again, the things that they're doing with their rentals and their rehabs, that motivates me to kind of keep going and doing it. I think as you develop any business, like your network kind of changes a little bit in the sense of you meet people that have similar passions as you talk about those, and those are the people that you can share some of those nuanced details about stuff that other people are just, like I can complain like, oh, like the whole back extension of this house, the roof was all rotted out. Like most of my family's gonna be like, oh, that stinks. But other people like have a different level of care and concern or other comments to make other than like, oh, that stinks. And if you just have those people that are at first that are like, oh, that stinks, that can feel like not support. But it's not that they're not support, but like again, they're not roofers. Like they don't know necessarily what that means. It's not they don't care, but they just different levels of insight. So finding those people that you can share both of those those things with.
So being in the right community of people who are pushing you forward, and knowing the difference that even though your family support you, they may not be able to push you forward because they don't have the same passions that you do. But you can choose to find people who are, going in the same direction that you're going, so that you are both, exchanging information and pushing each other forward, sharing knowledge and encouraging each other. That is wonderful. Thank you so much. So can you tell us, like, if we have, where can we find you? Do you have an Instagram account that we can check up on you at, or a website? Where can we find you, and just, so that we can get more knowledge from you?
Yeah, I have an Instagram account. That's where we first kind of initiated. It's actually the reason why I made the Instagram account as well. I felt like I needed to, one, I wanted to get to know more people in my field of things that they were doing. Like two, I wanted to share kind of like how I developed and built the kind of the portfolio I had. I think it can be intimidating. It was intimidating, for me, but kind of figuring it out along the way. I figured if I can help cut other people's learning curves down, that's something that I wanted to do. So, again, I have an Instagram. It's at Ian, IA, N as in Nancy, the beginning of my last name, T as in Tiger, V as in Victor, AR, D as in David. So at Ian Tvard. I commented as well, kind of on your last post. Perfect. Yep, you shared it. I was gonna say you don't want to have to track down that last name, but you can find me there. You can send me messages. I'll answer them, answer questions. I have a YouTube channel as well that links in my bio if you want to kind of follow along there. I try to tell longer stories of things that again happen, and weird things. Like I went to evict somebody and they filed for bankruptcy. So how do you deal with that? Because again, like you're a creditor as a landlord, they owe you money that stops the eviction process. How do you go through that? So I kind of share some of those weirder stories, longer stories, on YouTube as well. But again, if anyone has questions, they're free to send me a private message, and I'll answer them to the best I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I've dropped his Instagram handle in the chat, so you all can follow him and, get more knowledge about how he's building his wealth day by day. He's 3 years in, and he's, he has more years to come, and he is still, building more and more. He's at 16, and I bet he's not stopping there. Do you have an idea of where you'd like to stop?
So when I first started, the goal was like 30 units. And the reason that is one of the first things I read early on was, there were these people that did a real estate seminar and stuff. And they said, people come up to me and ask me, how do I be financially free? And I tell them, buy a 30-unit apartment community. And they laugh at me. And I was like, no, really. If you buy a 30-unit apartment community and you rent each unit for $600, that's $18,000 a month. If 2/3 of that went to paying for your living expenses, or paying for the house and the maintenance and everything else on the building, and you were left with $6,000, could you find a way to live on $6,000? And I was like, oh, it's so simple. I just need 30 units. So that's where I started with my number. Right now, that number's moved to I want 100.
That is great. Okay, good question. How is the COVID epidemic affecting your business?
So it's not, honestly, it's making more opportunities. Like, I will say that, like, I haven't noticed, like, people paid their rent a little slower, but no one hasn't paid their rent because of COVID. And admittedly, like, the US, I admit I don't know much about Britain's response, but the US sent out stimulus checks to everybody, every household. A bunch of government programs opened up to help pay for rent and things like that, like here in the US. So that's really kind of helped along so far. Like, I haven't noticed negative impacts, but I've noticed a lot more people selling, a lot more people open to seller financing because they're worried about the pandemic. I mean, it's changed necessarily how you prioritize work orders and things like that. You know, with fixing things, again, some things get pushed back and delayed as you're trying to honor social distancing and, you know, wear masks and things like that. But I guess the other way it has affected it, as it has, like, a pandemic didn't help people that had problems. Meaning, if you had a tenant that was slow to pay rent, or you had a tenant that wasn't paying rent, and you were kind of putting that off or trying to work with them, I think that's another mistake people make. Like, if you don't have $500 this month, you're unlikely to have $1,000 next month. Like, you as the landlord, you know, again, from managing huge apartment communities, the sooner you cut the loss, the better. Like, it's unfortunate that happened to the person. Like, it's tough, but you have to move them out, and you have to move someone in that's paying. So a pandemic, a financial crisis, like, they don't help those people that were already struggling. They heighten it. And in this last one we saw in the US, courts closed. They did eviction moratorium. So essentially you couldn't evict people for several months. Some states you still can't evict people. So if you were waiting and putting things off, and you weren't treating your business like a business, like if you were saying, like, I'll try to continue to work with this person and do things, this pandemic put you in a problem where now you're essentially forced to not collect rent, forced to not move the person out. It made your problem worse. You know, again, thankfully, again, I kind of learned and built off of those experiences, and I don't tend to keep people who, you know, again, aren't paying.
And that makes so much sense. And it's not just in real estate. I find that in so many areas that we are, if you have a problem and you hide it under the carpet, you don't address the problem when it's a small problem, it only gets bigger. You know, you
Absolutely.
have a financial problem and you're not addressing it. You're making excuses for yourself as to why you're going to address it later. You have a health problem and you're not addressing it. You know, you're making excuses to why you put your health in the back seat and do it later. You know, it just gets worse. So that's very interesting as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Just before we go, I just wanted to ask everyone in the chat, could you just drop something that you've learned, something that you've picked up, whether it's something small, something big, something that you've learned? This is a practice we do in all of our Wealth from Little conversations, because, you know, when you write things down, you type it down, you cement it in your mind. And, you know, you came in here, you had ideas of what you wanted to leave with. And now we're coming to an end. I want you guys to just drop in the chat something that you're leaving with, right? Write it, that share it, and that will also help other people who maybe missed something, and they can also pick up on what you've learned, you know. And so if you drop something in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so investing in things which increase in value. Yes, that's really important. How to calculate and estimate costs for rent and mortgages. Yes, that was very practical. Cash for keys, very good idea. Would be good to hear more about the application. Yes, definitely. To buy an inexpensive property first. Yes, that was what Ian said. That was his first strategy. He started small and built up from there, because he started with, you know, he didn't have much. He had zero. Let me not say he didn't have much money. He had zero amount of dollars, and he found the money. Where there's a will, there's always a way. Thanks for sharing so much useful knowledge. One of the things I learned was that is to factor in when setting the rent price. Yes, things like maintenance and vacancies, etc. Yeah, exactly. What do you think of HMOs is a question. Okay.
Can you define HMO as an abbreviation?
Okay, AK, could you define exactly what you are asking him? House
House
of,
of multiple.
what do
That
you think of house of multiple occupancies? What do you think of that?
So is that that must be a like an English phrase? Does that mean multiple people like
So,
live in the?
AK, are you talking about like one house with 5 rooms and everyone having a room? Just so that we're all like completely clear on what you're asking. Yes, okay. Yeah. He's talking about one house with 5 bedrooms and everyone having a room. So
Yeah.
like house hacking. Okay, yeah. What do you think about that? Having, renting owning, would that be, AK, would that be you owning the house as a landlord and then renting the 5 rooms to 5 different people, or are you living in the house as well and then renting 4 of the rooms to 4 other people? What would that look like? And then Barbara says, being comfortable with good debt. Okay, thank you. Let me know. You can keep dropping in more insights that you've learned. Owning or leasing it. Okay, not living in it. Right. Okay, now that's a bit clearer.
Yeah. So I definitely think that there's a really good market for that, particularly in really big cities. You see that a lot, in like New York, Boston, Washington, like here in the US. I imagine London being a similar, city in size and expense to those. You'd see that a lot more. You will make more money renting out each room than you will by renting out the whole place. Because again, you can charge more for the room. Personally, that's not something I do because one, like I'm not necessarily like in the right city for that. And two, like I don't want the work of like every time, like essentially now you have 5 tenants, right? If you have a 5-bedroom house, which means when someone moves out, one person moves out of that bedroom, like you have to find a tenant for that bedroom. You have to clean up any of the bedroom. You have to clean up the bedroom, anything they left behind. And to me, that's work that I don't want to do. But that doesn't mean that's not an excellent strategy. That doesn't mean it's not an excellent way in bigger cities. Doesn't quite work where I live. It's just not quite the work I want to take on either.
Right. Okay, great. So it works well in big cities. Well, according to Ian, his opinion is that it works well in big cities, but it's not something that he wants to do. So definitely look into it because there are different strategies in building your property portfolio. So definitely look more into that, gain more knowledge in that and see how that could work for you and if it's something that you really like to do or not. Yeah. Yes, okay. Lighter says that thank you. She learned so much from us both. Thank you, Lighter. Nikki says Ian is such an inspiration. Yes, he is. He really, really, really is. Any more insights, drop it in the chat. You will be encouraging someone else and you also solidify this for yourself, right? So great. Thank you so much, so much, so much. For this time and for even the future sharing, giving us the access to your Instagram so that we can learn more from you and continue to increase our knowledge and build our wealth. Moving on from to just recap what Ian's story. He started with little. He had very little. He had 0. He was a student in law school in between first and second year when he decided that he seen someone who was an inspiration to him and he was inspired and he took action immediately. He took action immediately and he bought his first property. As he bought his first property, he found the money because he didn't have the money. He found the money. It wasn't a very expensive property, but he found the money to finance that property, right? He went to an area where properties were not too expensive and he did that. When he did that, he faced some obstacles like we all do on our wealth building journey. We will face obstacles. If you're not facing obstacles, you're not trying. If you're comfortable and you're relaxing, then you're not growing. Because when you're growing and you're expanding yourself, your mental self, your relational self. You will be facing obstacles in different areas, but you will be growing into that, right? From those failures, you learn new skills. He's learned new skills in how to manage his family. He's learned how to allocate his time, so that he's focused when he's with his children and his son, and when he's with his wife. And then when he's out in his business, he's focused completely on that. When he faces obstacles, he takes an hour to think about it and to relax, and then he takes action, so that he's not thinking about it 24 hours in a day, right? Because that is what causes people to be overwhelmed, frustrated, and then eventually distracted, because you can't continually, keep like fighting mini battles. You need to focus on one thing at a time in your day. And that's what he does, and that's what is pushing him. Then he has his commitment to himself. This is not to anyone, this is to himself. He said, he tells himself that he's able to learn anything. And I believe that every single one of you here is able to learn anything. Secondly, he's also committed. He knows he has the ability, but he's also committed to learning anything that he needs to learn to get to where he wants to be. Everything that we want is available. He knows that everything he wants is available, but also he knows that everything he doesn't want is also available. He mentioned that he didn't want to have to be telling his kids and his grandkids, I don't have enough money for that. I don't have money for that. We can't afford this. We can't afford that. All those conversations are available. It's also, what is also available is, yes, you can do what you want. You can become a doctor. You can become a lawyer. You can become a real estate investor. You can become what God has truly called you to be by, and follow your skills without, having to do something just because of money. And he's seen those two choices, and he's picked the choice that he wants, and he's working towards achieving that with everything that he does. He's picked property investing. That's for him. For you, that may also be for you if you're interested in property. If you're not interested in property, that is fine. There are so many ways that we can build wealth, and usually it's with what interests us. If you're interested in starting a business, then you can do that and build wealth. If you're interested in, just investing in the stock market, you can do that as well to build your wealth. But you need to get the roadblocks out of your way. His last thing was that it was okay to fail. He said it was okay to fail, because as you fail along the way, you're learning, you're picking up new skills, and you're still going to get to your destination. The only way you don't get to your destination is if you give up. If you give up, that's the only way that failure really becomes permanent. But as long as you don't give up, you take some time out, you relax, and you be like, okay, well, that didn't work out. How can I, get there in a different way? That's, then you keep moving. Here's the thing. I truly believe failure is a perception. Someone decides that they sit a test, and that if they get 70%, that's failure to them. Someone decides they sit a test, and if they get 40%, that's failure to them, right? So everyone decides what failure is. And for most of us, we hold ourselves to such a high standard that we hold, and we say that, if we get anything less than perfect, then that's failure. And when we have those kind of huge standards of perfection for ourselves, it holds us back from moving forward and learning and still having fun with the moment. One thing that he mentioned was about time. Time is something that is the most limited resource we all have. We all have 24 hours in a day, and we all have a set number of years. And he's decided that he's going to do the best with the time he has in his business and in his family, right? So spending time thinking, he's failed, that's ridiculous, because he's using everything he's learning as, okay, he's using that to improve his time, and he's using that to maximize his time and to maximize his learning and to ensure that he keeps on moving forward. And that's what I want for you guys today as well, to keep on moving forward. Don't get stuck and keep pushing. Thank you so much again, Ian. And thank you all for joining. The fact that you joined and you stayed to the very end says so much about you. And those who are watching the replay, the fact that you're actually taking the time to watch the replay says so much about your commitment to to moving forward, to gaining more knowledge and to improving yourselves. So I want to give you guys a big congratulations, and you all just give yourself a pat on the back, wherever you are in your house, give yourself a pat on the back. not many people will be here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 4 listening. Trust me. And the fact that, and not many people will be still watch the replay to gain, just one thing that will move them forward. So I want to thank you all. As always, if you do need any help, you have my, I believe that everyone has my email, which is elizabeth@wealthfromlittle.com. Send me an email and, we can help you move through whatever is holding you back so that you can every one of us can start building our wealth from little. Ian started 3 years ago, we can start to get today. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, everyone that is still here. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And Ian, I appreciate you as well. Thank you so much. I'm going to end this now. I'm just having so much fun, but I'm going to end it. So bye, everyone. And we will, I'll see you all in my emails or on Instagram. Thank you so much, Ian.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, everybody, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.